The Lakers are one of the scariest teams in the NBA this season, not only because of how good they were post-trade deadline, not only because of how good their offseason was, but because of a variety of reasons that I think make this the most interesting season for the Lakers in years. Really quickly though, I want to thank the sponsor of today's video, Brilliant.org. Now, I go through a lot of numbers for these videos, stats, contract numbers, free agency stuff, things like that. And it took me years to really fully understand how all of these interact. And I really wish I had a course like Brilliance to teach me how to understand these numbers way earlier. Whether it's for work or you're simply curious about learning new things, Brilliant is here to help you reach your goals. From simple to advanced, from science to data analysis, they want to help you understand these concepts in the most efficient and effective way possible. And that's the most important part of all this to me. And I'm sure a lot of you can probably relate. It's hard to find enough time in the day to truly learn new skills and concepts on your own, and that's the whole reason that Brilliant exists. Their interactive learning techniques are designed to help you build your knowledge base in a practical way without taking a ton of time out of your busy schedule. And you aren't just memorizing figures or facts, which quite frankly is how I've forced myself to learn things my entire life. You're actually thinking through and understanding each concept thoroughly. For me, that concept will be data analysis, but for you, it could be any number of courses that they offer. And to try everything that Brilliant has to offer free for a full 30 days, visit brilliant.org/sporting or click the link in the description. The first 200 of you will get 20% off Brilliant's annual premium subscription. If you want to learn a new skill in an efficient way, make sure you check out brilliant.org, and thank you again to Brilliant for sponsoring today's video. So first and foremost, let's talk about the offseason. Let's talk about how good LA was last year, and then let's talk about what's going to happen to them after this season. So the Lakers offseason was really, really interesting to me because I thought that they were going to end up losing somebody. I've talked about this before. When they brought in Gabe Vincent, when they brought back D'Angelo Russell, I was like, okay, there's a big Spurs offer out there for Austin Reeves. That means he's going to be going somewhere else. And they were able to bring him back on like 4 years, 50-something million. It's going to be one of the best contracts in the league over the next couple of seasons. And the way that they've changed this roster over the last 6 to 7 months has been incredible. And it's completely revitalized this era of Lakers basketball. I kind of thought prior to the trade deadline with the Russell Westbrook experience and all that, I kind of thought that this era of Lakers basketball was over, that LeBron was going to leave at some point, that they were never going to get back to the team that they were when they were in the bubble. Anthony Davis was good, but obviously not playing a ton. Like, we continued to see all those issues for them, and they figured it out. They were legitimately one of the best teams in the league after the trade deadline last year. Yes, they got swept by the Nuggets, but the Nuggets only lost like 4 games in the entirety of the postseason. I don't think that necessarily is an indictment against this Lakers team. I think they were legitimately a very, very good team post-trade deadline last year, and that should continue because the roster is at least a little bit better, if not in some areas significantly better. Now, the other thing to consider here is this is not going to be the roster that the Lakers go into the postseason with. Assuming that the Lakers make the playoffs, there's going to be a move at the deadline, because when you look at some of the contracts that they signed their guys to, bringing back Rui, bringing back D'Angelo Russell, a couple of other players on the roster, these contracts are interestingly very, very tradable. They might be on some bigger numbers like Rui and D'Lo, between $17-19 million a year, but they're shorter contracts. And if you combine a couple of those players together, it's very easy to get up to a max contract slot, trading away those salaries in exchange for maybe Kyrie Irving in the middle of the season. Whatever they think they can try and put together in the middle of the year. If they're, a top 4 team in the conference at the deadline, they have the pieces that make things very, very easy for them in terms of upgrading their roster. And I would expect that to be the case because it's very clear that that is why these contracts are structured the way that they are. However, on top of all that, this could also still be the end of this era of Lakers basketball, because nobody's talking about the fact that after this season, both LeBron as well as Anthony Davis can be free agents in the summer of 2024. They both hold a player option. I expect both of them to decline that player option. And depending on what happens this season as well as next offseason, there is going to be some significant changes with the Lakers. Again, depending on what happens with their year, because LeBron is going to be 39 years old. It's clear based off how they're building this roster that they're trying to take away some of the offensive responsibility from him, specifically during the regular season. Even in the playoffs last year, despite the fact obviously that he was hurt, it was kind of alarming how not involved LeBron was in terms of the on-ball offense until they really desperately needed him to be. And all of that stuff to me is concerning in terms of his future in the league, as well as, of course, the future of this Lakers roster, because there's a situation in which the season goes fine. Maybe they lose in the second round and LeBron is gone, and maybe Anthony Davis starts looking at other possibilities. There are going to be teams out there that are going to have salary cap space in 2024 because because even though there aren't a ton of outstanding free agents, there are guys like this that you could always plan for opting out of their contract and maybe being able to sign them. That's not kind of the trend lately. The trend is these guys are going to opt out, re-sign with the Lakers. If they want to go somewhere else later, they'll just ask to be traded because they get the most money from the Lakers. But the LeBron situation specifically is interesting because his kid could be in the league next year. He could go want to sign, a cheap contract with one team or another, play one final season and be done. We could be entering that era or that phase, I should say, of LeBron's career. But Anthony Davis is the other big part of this to me because, like I said, he could technically opt out and then go sign somewhere else, but that's not really what players do anymore. And assuming this season isn't a complete disaster, he'll probably, regardless of what LeBron does, he will probably opt out and then re-sign with the Lakers for the most amount of money and the most amount of years. But that doesn't mean in a year or 2 years, he isn't going to be looking to go elsewhere via trade request. That is the trend now in the NBA. And even as, maybe limited as LeBron's impact has been this most recent season due to injury, as well as his just a little bit declining play offensively, even with that, if you take him off this team, there's not a championship contender. They're just not. And I don't know how they're able to replace LeBron. They're going to have salary cap space. They're going to have tradable contracts. They're the Lakers. They'll still try and figure it out. But all this leads to me to this idea of like, how aggressive will the Lakers actually be this season? That's what I mean by terrifying. Like, they're really, really a scary team to be a fan of as well as to play against at the moment because they do have an incredible amount of talent. They're going to be one of the best defensive teams in the league. They still have LeBron. They still have Anthony Davis. They still have the opportunity to upgrade at the deadline. Again, that could even still mean Kyrie Irving at the deadline if that's how things go in Dallas this year. They have the contracts and potentially the assets, depending on what first round pick, stuff kind of happens for them. Potentially the ability to bring in another player. All those things together make them a really scary team to play against. But then if you're a fan of this team, you also could be in a situation where you trade for that guy at the deadline that's on a big deal. You trade some of your future assets. And then in the offseason, LeBron opts out, goes and plays somewhere else. Davis opts out, signs on this massive contract for a guy that's obviously very good, but you're always concerned about him getting hurt. And then in a year or two, he could request a trade. And suddenly you're looking at a situation where AD is gone, LeBron is gone, and you have no control over any of your first round picks until like 2030. Like, that's a realistic scenario if you're a Lakers fan. It's the worst case scenario, but it still 100% could happen. And that's what I mean when I say that they are scary and they are terrifying. What I would anticipate happening is they're going to be very good. I think they're going to be one of the best teams in the conference. Depending on what happens with the rest of the league, they're going to have as much of an opportunity as any team to represent their conference in the finals this year. I think they're that good. Their offseason was that good and they're that talented. And there's evidence last year post-trade deadline of them being that caliber of team. If, of course, they can stay healthy. I would anticipate them getting the postseason, making a postseason run, and then depending on what happens there, depending on what happens with Bronny and LeBron wanting to go play where he wants to play, LeBron will either opt out, come back on a big deal or a 2-year deal, whatever the case may be, continue to sign 1-and-1s to have that flexibility, or he'll go play somewhere else. AD will come back, and then you'll have to figure out what to do with Anthony Davis moving forward. Hopefully he either stays healthy and happy, or you get a ton in exchange for him in a trade in a year or two, and that saves your team. But all of those things together, to me, would really stress me out if I was a Lakers fan. There is a lot going on. There is a ton on the line for this team. It could be all the way from they're the winner this year, they are the champion, they win the title, and LeBron gets another ring, all the way to whenever LeBron's season is over for the Lakers this year, it could be his last game in a Lakers uniform, potentially his last game in the NBA overall, and then you're looking at a ton of changes with this Lakers team.